Hello, I'm Milan Shravinsky and you're watching Break the Fake. They make them, we break them, and tell you everything you need to know. Russian oil has once again lost its appeal on the international market, this time not for moral reasons, but for entirely pragmatic ones. In an effort to secure a trade deal with the US, Indian refineries have begun cautiously but persistently pushing Russian barrels away from their terminals. Business, it turns out, likes peace, stability, and no sanctions. According to Reuters, the largest players in the Indian energy market, Indian Oil, Reliance Industries and Bharat Petroleum, are not accepting offers from traders to supply Russian oil in March and April. No strident announcements, but a very telling silence. Officially, no one is saying that Russian oil has become toxic, but it seems that Indian refineries have suddenly become allergic to anything that could complicate negotiations with Washington. This is especially true on the eve of a trade agreement that the US and India plan to finalize by March, lowering tariffs and deepening economic cooperation. To compensate for the reduction in supplies from Russia, Indian factories are actively rewriting their energy menus. And, as it turns out, the world is a big place, and there is plenty of fish in the sea when it comes to oil supplies. The situation is made even more interesting by US President Donald Trump's decision to cancel the 25% punitive tariff on Indian goods, which had previously been imposed due to India's purchasing of Russian oil. The message is crystal clear. If you want to trade without penalties, choose the right partners. India seems to have understood the message, and Russian oil has once again proven that discounts are good. But when they come with sanctions attached, any interest in such products quickly evaporates. As a result, Russia is left with fewer and fewer buyers. The world moves on, and the energy superpower increasingly finds itself standing in line without an invitation. Switzerland's so-called diplomacy of neutrality has reached a new level, and this time there is some classical music playing in the background. Swiss Foreign Minister Ignazio Cassis visited Moscow and presented Sergey Lavrov with a music box playing a melody by Tchaikovsky. The message here was subtle. You must remember that Russia is part of Europe.
Just for the better. Very creative.
In order to remind you of being part of Europe.
And the other one to remind you that Russia is part of history and the future.
Now, the only problem with this part of Europe thing is that modern Russian politics is doing everything possible to prove the opposite, not only with words but also with missiles, wars, and a general disregard for international law. In this reality, the music box looks more like an attempt to stop tanks with Ballet. Switzerland, known for its belief in dialogue and neutrality, has apparently decided to focus on cultural memory. The idea is that if political arguments do not work, perhaps Tchaikovsky will help. If it does not stop the war, it will at least create a certain atmosphere, maybe. However, in this story, it is worth calling a spade a spade. Russia has never been part of Europe, neither politically nor in terms of values or civilization for that matter. Europe, you see, is built on law, freedom and responsibility, while the Russian state has been built for centuries on the idea of empire, on fear, and a general contempt for human life, unfortunately. As for Tchaikovsky in a box, I'm not really sure it can erase the memory of the tragedies in Bucha, Mariupol and so many others that happened during this war. The only thing it did so far was to ensure the Swiss foreign minister wouldn't go home empty-handed. For his little music box, he received a different box. And this one, while ostensibly silent, actually speaks volumes. You see, the trinket came with a painted image of the Kremlin. A travel souvenir, or perhaps a reminder of who's winning any misguided attempts at friendly gestures, eh? Without dialogue, there is no trust, Cassis later told reporters, adding that the goal was, and I quote again, to show the willingness to reach out and to say, "We are here to talk to you and to listen to you." End of quote. If only the Russians could be trusted to respond in kind. So far, the only outreach Moscow did was with cruise missiles. And as for trust, think of a certain week-long ceasefire that ended up barely lasting 4 days. True story, by the way, if you remember. Russian propaganda has once again proven that when arguments run out, nuclear rhetoric comes into play. Again. This time Vladimir Solovyov claimed that military personnel in the Special Military Operations Zone, meaning war zone obviously, had requested tactical nuclear weapons. He said that their patience had run out, restrictions must be lifted, and they must take real action.
Мне кажется, что нам надо просто снять с себя все ограничения и действовать мощно. Я регулярно, когда отправляюсь за ленту, я своим друзьям, многие из которых сейчас уже очень на высоких должностях, я спрашиваю, что привезти. И традиционный ответ одного из блестящих русских полководцев – это тактическое ядерное оружие. Хватит. Ну, просто реально хватит уже. Давайте уже серьезно. И тогда вот вся эта шобла, сидящая на переговорах в Эмиратах, вот все эти Будановы и прочие, поймут, что шутки кончились.
In the classic tradition of Russian television, Solovyov did not provide any evidence, any names or confirmation of any kind. But why should he? In the Kremlin's cosmology, a TV anchor is a journalist, a military correspondent, the voice of the trenches, and, if necessary, a nuclear-level strategist. If tomorrow he declares that tank crews are requesting a BFG 9000 or a working Death Star prototype for support, there is obviously no reason to doubt him. The choice of instrument itself is particularly interesting. Tactical nuclear weapons are not a magic button for victory, but rather a last resort with catastrophic consequences, including international isolation, environmental disaster, and the complete loss of any remaining legitimacy. But for television, these are minor details. On air, nuclear weapons appear compact, neat, and very convincing, especially when discussed by someone who has never been on the front lines or under fire. Also, let's not forget the credibility issue. Who can tell exactly how many times Russia tried to play the nuclear card in this war? Nobody. Well, that's exactly the point. There have been so many cases of nuclear saber-rattling and blackmail that nobody can even remember anymore. By now, the Kremlin gang seems like a bunch of rowdy teenagers, except instead of shouting 6-7, they keep shouting nukes. And in the end, this is a rather different kind of brain rot, one that infects Western decision-makers and paralyzes any effort at concrete action, because obviously nukes are a serious thing, right? Well, apparently, when Putin's crew says nukes, it's more as if they said skibbity, meaning it doesn't really amount to much. They tried this apocalyptic signaling 1,000 times. Nothing ever came out of it, and they just won't get better material, apparently. So I suppose all that a reasonable person can do is politely ignore the noise and move on. And with this, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.